And how's everybody doing today? I want to apologize for the technical difficulties I had earlier today, but I've got those worked out and I'm ready to go with a broadcast. It's Dr. Roddenberry coming to you from Willow Springs on a beautiful spring morning, getting ready to talk to you about love and marriage. Oh my goodness. So, let's go ahead and get started without further ado. It's marriage and intimate relationships, okay? We're all going to have hopefully one of these during the course of our life, and it's going to be very important to understand how these kinds of relationships develop, the dynamics of them, and how you can be successful in your marriage and intimate relationships as an adult. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. We've got some learning objectives here, and then we'll go right back up into it. Now, here's the deal. Marriage, the difference between shacking up and being marriage is that marriage is legally sanctioned, right? It actually means something. I've got friends here that don't have health care because they don't have this legal document uh, of marriage, and so they cannot give insurance to their partner. So, it really matters, but it's sort of this legal and at the same extent that there's this legal sanction, there's also a social sanction with it too. So we talk about it as being some sort of having a religious, a moral significance. So traditionally, it's included economic interdependence, common residence, sexual fidelity, and shared responsibility for children. Now, I'm wondering, back when I got married, it was a long time ago, and we were young, and my wife and I have total economic interdependence. I'm wondering how many of you mix finances with your marriage partner? Is that getting more likely or less likely these days? I'd be curious to find out how you young kids are doing that today. Now, here's the thing, marriage has changed since I was a kid. Marriage has changed completely in the last 30 years in terms of the patterns of what happens. Now, um, what you're going to notice is that today there's increased acceptance of singlehood. Back when I was a kid, and even before in the 70s, um, the main goal of everybody when they got out of high school was to pair up and find a marriage partner at some point. You really kind of wanted to be married in your early 20s. It was a great motivation. I'm not sure why I had that reflex, but we all had that reflex. And so we went out, and the first thing we wanted to do was pair off and get married. Some of my friends got married at 17, some got married at 20. Two of my brothers got married at 18. I got married at 24, which was kind of old. But you know what? We were all trying to get married. What I noticed today in talking to younger people is people are delaying getting married now. Right? So, your average age of your first marriage, where it was early in the 20s back in my day, it's getting even into the late 20s. Now, instead of getting married, people are cohabitating, right? Just living together in a sexually intimate relationship, with your partner, but you don't get that piece of paper. It's kind of interesting. I remember when my wife and I were cohabitating back in the 90s, I would have to clear out of the house, the apartment in Boone in Appalachian State when my wife's family, parents would come up to visit her because we were not supposed to be cohabitating together. But now everybody's doing that. I've always believed, been told, and for me, marriage is permanent. It's forever. But you'll talk to some people now. Actually, I have a former student. He's in his 40s, and I remember when he got married, he had told me that he had had this partner. His mom was getting ready, was sick, mortally sick, and she wanted to see him married before she died. So he actually got married, and we used to talk about it. And he said, I don't think this is forever. We just like each other, and my mom wanted to see us get married. So he actually didn't even think of it as forever. And so what you see now these days is people have different ideas about what marriage is. And, it doesn't always have to necessarily be permanent to them. Now, when I was a kid, all my friends' moms stayed at home, and all my friends' dads were the sole breadwinners. You could go over to somebody's house after school, and their mom would fix you a snack because she'd be right there in the house cutting and cooking dinner. And the dads always did all the outside yard work. Flash forward to 30 years, and now what you're going to see is there are men taking on these caregiving roles, men taking on cooking and other roles. And what you're going to find, if you look at this graph right here, is that women are now in the workforce. That's the biggest difference. Back in my day, moms didn't work. Now what you see is everybody's working, probably because we're so short of money, but everybody, males and females, are working. And this may be why people are delaying marriage and childbearing, because these kinds of things sort of decrease the flexibility and upward mobility of females. And so, what you're going to see is you're going to get this increased voluntary childless. And what this all means is you're not going to see that mom and dad with 2.2 kids and a dog anymore. You know what I mean? It's just the decline of the classic nuclear family. People are living in different situations these days. And the idea is people are just looking for intimacy, but they're not looking for that socially ascribed classic intimate marriage that used to exist in America in the mid 20th century. Now, uh, I had a friend in graduate school. This fellow was from Turkey. And I remember second year in graduate school, he had never mentioned a romantic partner. He had never mentioned being in love. He'd never mentioned any of that stuff. And I remember after second semester of the second year ended, he said, "Yes, I have to go back to Turkey for the summer. I'm going back to get married." And I was like, "Holy cow, man, I didn't even know you had a girlfriend. I can't believe that. Wow." And he's like, "Well, actually, I've never met her before." I was like, "Excuse me." And he said, "Yes, this is actually a union that was prescribed by my parents. And I'm going back to meet this lady and we're going to get married." And I was just aghast. You mean you aren't marrying a woman that you love? You are just getting married as a contract. And it was completely normal to him, and he was completely happy with this. And the thing is, to me, the idea of an arranged marriage is just something that's hard to even fathom. But what you're going to see is that 80% of the world cultures practice some sort of arranged marriage. There are ways to arrange marriage that you're going to see in every place. In some areas, some cultures, some small pockets, you're going to see that there are people who do practice these arranged marriage. Now, you might say this is horrible. What about the two people who are being married who don't necessarily want this? Well, what these cultures think is that marriage really isn't just a melding of two people, it's a melding of two families. So there are considerations larger than just the two people involved in that intimate relationship. And so these people say, you know what, this is a better way to pair bond people. Now, you might say this is horrible. It should be about you and that romantic partner. But in my years of experience, I've found that the problem comes in trying to interact with these two different families. My in-laws, my wife's in-laws. That's where the conflict comes from. And so these people realize that there needs to be a synergy between two groups and not just two people, right? Now, the research doesn't necessarily dispute the value of arranged marriages, right? So here in America, we've got a divorce rate that hovers near 50%. 50% of all marriages will end. But you know what? You're going to see the divorce rate for arranged marriages is very, very low, 6%. Now, does this represent that these marriages are happier, or that there are cultural customs that prevent the dissolution of an unhappy marriage? The research doesn't necessarily suggest a direction with why this might be so, but what you'll see is that these marriages do tend to last. Now, monogamy, having one spouse at a time, having more than one spouse at a time is polygamy. Um, and then you've got sort of polyamory. So I actually do have a friend who is in the fundamentalist Latter day Saints culture here in America, out in Arizona. Uh, this female I know is in an arranged marriage. You bet you didn't know that there are arranged marriages here in America. And more importantly, she is actually a sister wife. She is one of two wives that a male has in this particular church. Now, polygamy is illegal in this country, so there are no certificates. If you remember on the first chapter, we talked about it as being a legal bonding as well as a cultural bonding. So there are people who practice polygamy in the western part of the state, and typically what will happen is the male and female, the first couple, will get married legally. But then in this particular culture out in the southwest part of the United States, the second and third and maybe even fourth wife are married in the church, but not officially. And so polygamy does exist here in the United States in some religious cultures. Now, just like the research suggests, this person that I've met who is in this is not particularly satisfied with this particular arrangement, and she would fit into this. She does report less life satisfaction than other adult females I know in monogamous relationships. Now, what you're going to find is people tend to pair off in their own social groups, right? Uh, the fancy jet, super duper rich people marry one another. The blue collar people marry others. People tend to try and marry someone who has about a similar level of education, a similar level of economic standing. And so you're going to see sort of that pairing based on similarity. Your book calls this endogamy, right? And then, you know what? People tend to marry others who are politically similar, personalities similar, other types of similar personality characteristics. So, what you're going to see is similarity between people who tend to pair bond. So, you might ask the question, do birds of a feather flock together or do opposites attract? The research seems to suggest, based on endogamy and homogamy, that similarity is a strong attracting principle that you're going to see in marriage. So, what I want you to get from this is that while we do think of all cultures as having is marriage as being a romantic thing, it is a cultural, financial thing, and there are lots of different ways to do it. And what you will see is that a lot of times the successful pair bonding is based on similarity. Now, down here in the bottom, there are the research. Some people suggest females tend to gravitate towards older males. Men tend to marry younger. So you sort of women are marrying older, men are marrying younger. You look at that, and what you can kind of tease out of this in surveys and discussions is that what you're going to see is that females tend to look for qualities related to overall successfulness, socioeconomic status, things other than physical looks and youth. And what you're going to notice about your men is really we tend to focus more on youth and physical attractiveness when we are selecting a mate. Okay. Now, what are the predictors of success? And here's a chart right here that shows the increasing age of first marriage. Uh, when I was in 1990, when I got married, I was 24 years old. So I would be young for my age in getting married. Let's see, median age of first marriage. But you'll notice here in 1950, men were getting married at 23, females getting married at 20. And you'll see this slow progression up and first marriages are now starting late in the 20s. But what are some of the factors that are associated with successful marriages? Well, you know what? If your parents got divorced, turns out you have a higher risk of getting divorced as well. As you see down here, the age of getting married has increased. What you're going to find is that marriages that start at younger ages tend to be less successful than ones where people wait. Maybe because you've sort of, when you're 17, 18, 20, 21, you don't really know who you are. And so I guess if you wait a little bit later to get married, it tends to allow you to know who you are and to pair bond more successfully. Now, turns out people who date and take it slow tend to also have more success in their marriages. Check for Chris Roddenberry. My wife and I dated for 4 years before we got married. Personality. Turns out that there are personality traits that are not good for relationships. So, people who are perfectionists, people who have insecurities, sometimes it's going to make it more difficult in relationships for them. Uh, make sure you communicate well with your partner and that they can talk. Um, and express themselves. Communication is key for a successful relationship. And right here, when I look at some people, I notice some things that there are some relationships where people say really mean, bitter things to themselves. Make sure that you watch out for this. If you've got a partner that's insulting you, that's not supporting you, that's saying things that demean you personally. So my wife and I argue all the time, but we never insult each other. There are never mean, harsh, hateful things said. If you're with a partner and that partner kind of can be bitter and condescending to you, that's typically a red flag, if you will, that there may be problems later on in that relationship. Okay, whoa, hello, let me disappear here real quick. All right, so as you get married, I've been married 32 years. As you stay married, relationships are going to change, right? We change over the course of our lifetime. And so you can think about sort of the family life cycle. What you do as a young adult is you have to break away from the first family that you've got. You got to grow up, separate from mom and dad. And then right here, you have to join with a different family when you pair bond. Then you go through this period. So when I met my wife, I had to go meet her country parents. She had to come meet my city parents. Um, and we had to sort of, when we had the wedding, we've got my parents on the left side, her parents on the right side. You've really got to find a way to join excuse me, these two families. So you go through that part. Now, what tends to happen then, the parents, you get married, you have kids, and it's all about your family. And everything seems to fall away. The kids grow up and they begin to separate from you. So you got this time with your kids where you've got this one family unit and your kids look to you and you look to them. It's this nuclear family. And then the children are going to break away later in life. So the weird thing is you kind of break from your parents, meld with another family, and then the same thing's going to happen. So it's sort of what you have to do as you move through a relationship is you've got to understand that your marriage and your family situation is going to change. Things are going to be important at different ages, and you're just going to have to understand that marriages don't stay static and they involve sort of this changing structure in families. And so a marriage is a long, long time. So you can look here at the life cycle and see how families change throughout the course of a marriage. Now, what are some of the vulnerable areas for marriages? One of the things I think one needs to set out in a relationship is the expectations that people have when they go into relationships. If you're a very conservative person and you go into a relationship, you may expect certain conservative roles for people to play. And if you marry somebody who doesn't have those same expectations, when you get into the marriage, it's going to be quite difficult. Some of this premarital counseling that churches and other organizations will offer basically are designed to help people develop the proper expectations for their marriage. If you're dating someone, you don't move in together and you have no idea what they expect around the house and how they want to have the social relationship that is marriage, you can be surprised and disappointed when you get into that relationship. So, one of the things that they talk about is the need to integrate the female's career into it. I do know a lot of couples, conservative couples, where the female has a career, but she's also expected to engage in the prototypical conservative uh, role of mother as well. So you get these females that are quite stretched, and they have to decide: is it the career? Is it the traditional role? Now, more women now have demanding careers. My wife works about 60 hours a week. She has a super duper job. So, you know what? I take care of the cooking. I take care of the dishwashing. I take care of getting the kid, or I did, they've grown now. I took care of getting the kids to school and from school. And so, what you have to do is you have to learn how to manage those role expectations. And like I said, with females now in the workforce, we have to redefine what it means to have these gender roles. When I grew up, we called it women's work, but that's not appropriate now. That was based on an unfair patriarchal system where we had these very defined cultural roles. Now we don't have these very specific, rigid cultural roles, and you and your partner have to discuss and figure out how you're going to take care of the details of life as you raise children. Okay? Um, so, communication. You go to a premarital therapist, you go to a marital therapist, you go to your church. What they're going to tell you is that communication is the absolute key of a good relationship. Now, as I mentioned on the other page, it's not whether or not you fight with your partner that determines how problematic your relationship's going to be. Everybody fights in relationships. The question is, how are you going to fight? It is how you fight that really determines whether or not your relationship is in trouble. And so you can think of sort of these five different kinds of behaviors as a relationship as really uh, big red flags for your relationship. The apocalypse is the end of the world, right? If you know it from the sort of the biblical connotations. And so what the five horsemen of the apocalypse is five red flags that signal you're not in a healthy relationship. Contempt. Okay, uh, your partner can be wrong, but if you think if if you show contempt for them, not their ideas, but contempt for them. If you have a partner that doesn't just say you're wrong, but shows real contempt and sneers at you, not a great uh, not a great uh, uh, quality in a relationship. A partner that does nothing but criticizes you, that criticizes everything you say. If your partner is hypercritical, that is also a red flag. Here's the deal: if your partner, on the other hand, isn't willing to talk about things maybe that are important to you, if they are defensive and stonewall. So, defensive people are those that are sort of paranoid that things mean more than you say they mean. So when people who are unwilling to admit things, people who are unwilling to talk about problems, these are your defensive stonewalling people, and people that get really hyper angry and belligerent when they fight. So if your partner shows contempt for you when they fight, if all they do is criticize you, If they're defensive anytime you try to talk to them about something you'd like to have done, if they stonewall you, I don't want to talk about it today. That's bad, bad, bad. And if your partner tends to really blow up when they fight, these are all signs of poor communication abilities that are problematic for a relationship. Okay? Now, here's the deal. Again, it is we have people have high pressure careers. Lots of people have two jobs. Um, it is really, really important that the partners learn how to support one another. I know it sounds obvious, but what you're going to find in relationships is your partner may have a need to do something for their career, for their work, and instead of supporting them, people make it a point of fighting, right? And so what you find is that each partner is going to need times when your partner is going to have times when you need to support them simply so they can do something that's good for them. And it's really hard to do that in a relationship. What I find is that people, instead of supporting their partner because their partner is not helping them, okay, instead of supporting them for that short period, what they do is they argue at their partner and they get mad at them. So my mom always used to tell me marriage is not 50-50; it's 90-10. Sometimes you give 90 and get 10. Sometimes you get 90 and you give 10. So the times when your partner is doing something that seems selfish or on their own for work, you know what? Instead of fighting, maybe that's the time to support them and then expect them to do that for you when your time comes. It's not always 50-50. You should be doing your half of the work 50-50. No, sometimes they take advantage, sometimes you take advantage. And it's how we sort of uh, manage two careers and make two people happy because each of you has to have a great career and each of you has to help take care of this house that you are building, this home that you're trying to create. And so you've got to learn how to support your partner. Now, and you know the thing is, as it says here, one of the biggest benefits of this is you make more money. All right. So instead of tearing your partner down and keeping them from work, maybe if you can support them, they get that raise and make more money for you. I don't mind washing the dishes and washing the clothes and cooking dinner because my wife makes good money, right? And so, yeah, whatever. We had to adjust our roles. Sometimes she works late and I have to do leftovers. But in the end, it works for us as a team. Okay? Now, uh, research has suggested that um, that mothers working is not harmful to children, especially if they have a good first year. Um, Typically, it's not so much whether the mother works or the father works, but it's more about how much time the child spends in daycare away from family. So if you can find ways to sort of minimize the amount of time, mom, dad, aunt, uncle, any of these sort of help with the child's behavioral and academic performance later in life. So, uh, some of your traditional people will say that, when the baby comes, mom has to stay home. you know, if that works for mom in the family, like I said, we're working together and everybody's getting what they want, that's great. But if mom has to come home because it's a cultural belief and it makes the family unhappy, you're not getting that big a bang for following these traditional gender roles in the relationship. It's more about cooperation and communication. All right. So I have friends that cooperate and communicate and get along well. And then I do have some that have these very, very rigid sorts of roles. And this sometimes can create unhappiness in a relationship. I remember a long time ago, my wife actually had a colleague. Actually, I won't tell that story. Never mind. Move on. I'll tell that in webinar. Okay. Now, Here's the deal. If you talk to marital therapists, they're going to tell you that financial difficulties um, are the biggest, the most common cause of ruptured relationships. Um, and this may be why people are delaying getting married today. People surveyed sometimes suggest that lack of finances prevent them from getting married, from pair bonding later in life. This is why people are putting it off today. And so that can be a big problem in life. My wife and I started following. What's that guy's name? I forget his name. Dave Ramsey. About 20 years ago, my wife and I had a lot of consumer debt, some credit cards, some car payments, and it was really difficult and stressful trying to make bills. Followed this guy Dave Ramsey's financial advice, not so much his his uh, his religious advice, but his financial advice. And holy cow, getting the bills in hand and getting them paid off and becoming debt free really takes a lot of pressure off of a relationship. Now, my wife and I do have a rule in our house. Nobody makes a purchase over $200 without consulting the other partner. We just don't make purchases without asking the other person. Now, here's the thing. I don't tell my wife what she can and can't buy, and my wife doesn't tell me what I can and can't buy. However, we just make each other aware of what's happening and bring each other into the decision making process. However, you know what I mean? So when it comes to small purchases, we just keep each other in the loop, but we don't really tell each other what to do. Now, if the purchase is over $500, if we're buying, we would never go buy a car or a television or anything big without telling the other partner and getting their buy-in. And it's not because I tell my wife she can't have this car, she tells me I can't have this car, but that's a big financial decision. And so it's important that both partners sort of feel like they have some sort of say in how the finances are spent. Um, one spouse is responsible for handling day-to-day. However, a survey of financial practices of happily married couples do find three common themes. And I'm gonna be honest, this is my wife and I right now. Here's the deal. My wife makes good money, but like I said, she works tons of hours, and as a professor, I have a little more flexibility. So guess what? And I'm also kind of detail oriented and neurotic. So you know what? I take care of the day-to-day bills. Like I said, she spends money and I spend money and we talk about it. But I'm the guy that does the little checking account. It's always cool to have that under one person. If you have joint finances, I say, if you have joint finances. So we have this joint finance and I take care of it. That way we don't miss a bill. Hey, I thought you were going to pay that bill. Hey, I thought you were going to pay that bill. Nope. It all is taken care of by me. However, I sit down and we talk about it every month. And like I said, we make these joint spending decisions. So having one person take care of the deal makes it a lot easier. Now, again, the Dave Ramsey, we had a lot of debt. Uh, I We sat down and decided how we were going to live under our means and pay our debt down. And it took us, God, almost 20 years to pay off the house and the cars and all the credit cards. But the deal is, we lived under our means and we really worked on paying down the debt. One of the things I read about every day is the debt problem. Since I got sensitized by Dave Ramsey to eliminating debt, I focus on economic articles in the news every day, and they talk about high consumer debt. And really, this is one key to fixing your relationship is don't put the pressure of money in your relationship. Take it out. And so this is sort of what you want to do. So here's the deal. Marriages. What are some of the vulnerable areas? Well, number one, you need to make sure we both understand what we have to do in this relationship. We have to have the role expectations set down. All right. We have to learn how to fight without becoming personal uh, towards the other person. Okay. We need to understand that both partners are going to need some help in order to further their careers and be happy. Okay, we're going to have to make sure somehow that we cooperate with the child care, and it doesn't need to all fall on the mom. It needs to it doesn't have to be on the mom, but we have to find a way to cooperate with regard to this. And then we have to take care of the money. We have to take care of the money. So communication, take care of the money, set those role expectations, and cooperate so that each other can achieve their job vocational goals. Sounds kind of obvious and easy when you're talking about it in the abstract. But then you go home and you'll argue with your boyfriend or girlfriend about the money or who's going to wash the dishes. Um, and so, like I said, easier said than done. But these are sort of the five goals that you need to be focusing on as a relationship partner. And I know we're using the word marriage and traditional and man versus woman. And I'm sorry, that's that heterodoxy that we got when it comes to talking about relationships. But any kind of intimate relationship that you have, you're going to have to deal with these issues and learn how to cooperate with that romantic partner. You out of here? Bye. What time? I love you. Take care. All right. Bye. There you go. She's trooping off to work. She probably won't be home till about midnight tonight. God bless her. Look at that. Now, almost half of all marriages in the U.S. end in divorce, and higher divorce rates are associated with people who marry younger. Turns out minorities uh, uh, as well, lower income, and people, bizarrely enough, who live together before they get married. I wonder why. I've thought about that statistic for many years. Why do people are more likely to get married, divorced if they cohabitate? You would think if you got to live with a partner, you might learn about their behavioral quirks and make better decisions. So I'm not sure what it is about couples cohabitating, which seems to be a negative predictor of of marriage maintenance. Now, look at this statistic right over here. And what you're going to notice is that the likelihood of getting divorced from your partner goes up through the first 10 years. Look at that. And then if you can make it through the first 10 years, the likelihood of divorce drops steeply. So it's weird. It's all that pressure that occurs in the first 10 years. What's happening during this first 10 years? Well, like we talked about with the marriage life cycle, you're integrating two families, you have two children, and you're trying to accommodate children into your family. Those are sort of the two things, parts of the marriage life cycle. We talked about this earlier that are happening during the first 10 years. And these are very difficult parts of the relationship process. I'm not sure if this is why, but what you're going to notice is that if you can make it through 10 years, things seem to settle down a little bit. Okay. Now, when people go to divorce lawyers and talk about why they got divorced, you'll notice they're going to talk about communication difficulties. All we do is argue. I can't talk to them. They won't listen to me. Somebody's cheating. Somebody's over hyper jealous and ruining the relationship through their paranoia and overbearing attitudes. You know, we just grew apart. We're not similar anymore. That's what people say after 10, 15, 20 years sometimes. You know what? Again, it's the financial issues that come to head. It's foolish spending behavior. My spouse is ruining our finances by spending thousands, tens of thousands of dollars on this or that. I have a family member, a relatively distant family member, that wound up divorcing a longtime partner because the partner developed some sort of neurotic attitude and was on QVC, spending thousands and thousands of dollars jacking up the family's credit cards. And this pressure caused a rupture in the relationship. And then sometimes you're going to see relationships because somebody's drinks too much or has a substance abuse problem. So, and if you look at these, I'm sure you folks have probably had relationships, maybe not marriages, but close relationships rupture because of problems like these. And you know what? People are positive, so most people are going to underestimate. They're going to be super duper positive. I don't know if you had this experience, but when my wife and I got married at a young age, nobody expects you to succeed. Everybody's sort of starkly saying, "Boy, aren't you too young? You guys are kids. You don't know what you're doing." But you know what? Kids are always ever hopeful. And what they suggest is that most people tend to underestimate their chance of getting divorced. Okay. I can't talk from personal experience about this, but divorce is a complex one that usually it doesn't come out of nowhere. It builds. It's a lot of things. Now, there may be one triggering event, but it's usually the buildup of lots and lots of problems. Bizarrely enough, a majority of divorces seem to be initiated by the wife. Divorce is stressful for both, but it seems to have a bigger impact on men's health and mortality. Holy cow, I can't believe that. And But it can be more difficult and disruptive to women, especially if they're trying to manage the children that are a part of the disrupted relationship. And some people have trouble moving on, and they seem to have this preoccupation with the ex-spouse. Either they follow them, or they're always taking them into court if they're divorced. I do have a colleague of mine who got divorced many years ago, and he seems to spend his time in court with an ex that just can't seem to let that sort of let the anger go. And you're going to find some relationship partners are like that. Now, what are factors associated with being okay after a divorce? Well, of course, financial security always helps in a divorce. Turns out that having another partner seems to be a good predictor. And if you're the one that left, usually people who leave have all their ducks in a row. They may have another partner that they want to be with. They probably have their finances taken care of. And you know what? Having a better attitude about divorce, being able to be a little more philosophical about it. Now, divorce doesn't affect children in one way, depends on a lot of different things. Um, but it's hard to say. But in a bad relationship, a very, very toxic relationship, actually, divorce can be good for children. So it isn't, you can't just say, blanket statement, divorce is bad for children. It is bad, and there are some negative outcomes associated with it. However, if the relationship itself was toxic enough, it's worth these small behavioral effects that you're going to see. So sometimes divorce is not always the worst thing for children. Remarriages, step families. Most people will eventually get married, but you know what? It turns out if people who get remarried are even more likely to get divorced the second time, right? Um, do 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 do. And then blended families are just those families when uh, each partner has kids from another marriage that they have to blend together. Um, uh, let's see, same-sex marriage between 40 to 60% of gay males and 45% to 80% of lesbian females are in committed relationships. Um, and so let's see, comparisons to homosexual couples, same-sex couples do exist in different social contexts and are subject to more prejudice and discrimination. Okay. I do have a couple friend. My wife and I have known them, oh my goodness, 25 years now. They got married here in Raleigh many years ago. And gosh, I think uh, J and J, I won't tell you their names. I think they've been married now for 10 years, 10, 15 years. And they have a wonderful marriage. However, their marriage and their social relationships and the parties that they throw and just a little bit different. than the way my wife and I would do it. But you know what? They still have sort of that committed, that old married couple relationship. Um, Now the thing is, they tried to adopt kids a couple of different times in Raleigh, and were actually taken advantage of because they were a homosexual couple trying to adopt. And there was really no help. They actually were taken advantage of financially and couldn't get help because of prejudice, discrimination, attitudes towards their particular relationship and their desire to have children. Now, here's the deal. If you look at my friend J and J, you'll notice they love each other just as much as my wife and I love each other. When we go to parties and see their vacation photos, man, they're doing everything we're doing and having just as much fun as we're doing. Uh, and you know, sex is the same thing. And you know what? Uh, in, in homosexual couples, there needs to be cooperation and role expectations and and good communication. So the same things that are going to predict success in a heterosexual relationship are just as important for my friends J and J. And you know what? People who argue badly, homosexual couples can argue badly or well, just like heterosexual couples argue badly or well. And so, uh, and you know, being raised by a homosexual couple does there's nothing inherently bad about same-sex parents. Unfortunately, my friends J and J found out that a lot of people tend to have this bias because they think that somehow or another kids aren't going to have good adjustment if they're brought up in a homosexual family. You know what? It can be just as good or just as bad as a heterosexual family. So try to lose the bias if you could. All right. Cohabitation, everybody's living together, nobody's getting married these days. Look at this level of cohabitation. In the 1960s, uh, nobody shacked up unless they got married. Everybody was getting married 17, 18, 19. You get married young, but you were not allowed to live with somebody without marrying them. And what you're going to notice is that since the 1960s, the number of cohabitating couples that are not married has greatly increased. Now, as I suggest over here, and I suggested a slide back, most couples think of living together as as a trial. You know, let's practice. Let's see if we are compatible, and that makes so much intuitive sense to me. And I remember when I was a kid, I told myself that I was never going to marry someone that I didn't live with first. And you know what? My wife and I lived together for 3 years before we got married. However, the research actually shows, data shows that you're more likely to get divorced if you cohabitate than if you don't. Now, like I said, it may be because, well, it may be because people who cohabitate uh, don't have the inhibitions against divorce. As you know, people who have cultural values that say you can't live together before you get married probably have strong cultural values against divorce. So maybe it's the the progressive attitude that both leads you into cohabitating and potentially makes you willing to rupture a relationship. I don't know. It's an interesting concept though, because everybody I grew up with said I would never marry somebody unless I lived with them to find out how they are. I don't know. It's interesting. So, bitter and happy, carefree. We're going to carry on. And you know what? That's all I really had to say today because it's 11:49. I want to apologize for the difficulty with the broadcast. Microsoft Teams was hijacking my microphone and I couldn't figure out how to disconnect it. But I've got that all worked out and I hope that this won't be a problem next time. Until I see, oh, guess what? Next week is spring break. Oh, wow. I'm not going to say anything about that. When I see you on the next lecture, uh, I look forward to seeing you in the next lecture. That's what I'll say. Hey, have a great day. If you need any help, don't hesitate to send me a text or an email. Take care.